Next up, we have Jill Chmielewski. How did I do?
Very
Yay! A desire to take a different approach to her own health led Jill to pursue a health coaching certification. Feeling healed herself and seeing changes in her own family, Jill's passion is bridging the gap between conventional and integrative health care to help women experience greater health and vitality. Please welcome Jill.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay in the back? Okay, good. Let me see if I can work this. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about learning to trust yourself in the spirit of learning and living. So I know some of you here. Thank you for the people that I know for coming to support me. I really appreciate that. I am Jill Chmielewski. I am a registered nurse and I'm a women's health coach. And I help busy women, busy moms in any stage of life navigate their symptoms and really help them make tiny edits toward better health. I'm also a busy mom myself. Now this is a really old picture. I actually think it's about 12 years old. So my oldest daughter, who's like the second daughter on the right, is now a freshman in college. And the other three are in high school. So I get the busyness that comes with being a woman and a mom and trying to balance everything. I think all of us can relate to that. What I find when I'm working with clients is they come to me typically 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years after sort of starting the journey of motherhood with some pretty, nagging symptoms in their body, or, they're really tired, or they've sort of woken up one day in a body they no longer recognize because they put everybody else first. And I think that's so classic with moms, and I think it's such a great thing in a lot of ways. It's super selfless of us to do. But what happens is when we put everybody else first and we put ourselves last, especially for a long period of time, you end up one day waking up with a lot of symptoms in your body. I love this quote. I don't know who actually said it. Your intuition is your superpower. I think that's so true. I think especially for women, and I'm not poking at the men at all, but I think women have an intuition that is like no other. But I think we're not always very good at listening to our inner voice or our intuition and trusting ourselves. So, I don't know if you can relate, but oftentimes I find that, or at least in my younger years, I would say my 40s have been very different. But in my younger years, I would hear that inner voice, and then I would think that I wanted to go on this path, but then I would poll everybody I knew to see if they agreed with me. So I would ask my parents and my friends and anybody I knew, and then I'd end up making a decision because of what everybody else was telling me and not listening to my own inner voice. And I think that that's true for a lot of women out there. We tend to sort of listen to what everybody else says, and then we end up not taking our own path, but somebody else's path. So I'm going to just step back a little bit and just tell you about my journey towards becoming a health coach. I never ever thought I would be a health coach. In fact, I don't think that health coaching existed 29 years ago when I applied to college. And I don't think that I even knew for sure that I wanted to be a nurse. I remember, and you guys, I think most of you, there's a couple of people that probably found their college on the internet, but for the rest of us, we had a catalog that we looked through, and I can remember being a senior and looking through the catalog in my counselor's office and sort of flipping through and thinking, nursing, that kind of sounded good. It sounded like something I might be interested in. And I think it was for two reasons. One was, I remember always, even in high school, being really fascinated by the body. I was just in awe of what it could do. So I thought nursing sort of checked that box. And then I always knew that I wanted to help people. Whatever job I was in, I wanted more of like a frontline role helping people. So I think I just sort of chose nursing because it checked a couple of boxes for me and I knew I didn't want to do business. So I went to nursing school and I graduated and I worked as a neonatal ICU nurse at Northwestern. And then like most nurses, I dabbled in a few different areas of nursing. And one of the things that I found really early on is conventional medicine never really felt right to me. It was all about, we called it healthcare, but it was really sick care, where we just treat people with pill or surgery when they're sick, and then we send them on their way. And I can remember thinking that literally 25 years ago. And so it just kind of felt off for me. But there really was nothing else back then. I mean, I'm sure there was some integrative medicine out there, but I really wasn't aware of it. So I stayed in nursing. I went back to graduate school a couple of years later, and I got a master's in health law. And then I got pregnant while I was in grad school, and I had my daughter, and then I had 3 other kids pretty quickly. My oldest was still 3 when my 4th was born, so I have twins in the middle. So it was really, really bananas. So I took about 5 years off, and then I went back when my youngest was 1 because I felt like I was going out of my mind, and I needed to get out and see people and talk to an adult. And I can remember, so I'd taken 5 years off, and I remember going back to work, and nothing had changed in medicine. It was still the same, where it was giving people a pill when they get sick, doing surgery. There really wasn't any prevention. And so I think for me, it just, again, it never really felt quite right. And so fast forward about 5 years, so this is taking us to about 2010. And my oldest daughter is, she's 10. And she started to have some really significant digestive symptoms. And not just kind of the run-of-the-mill, some cramping or diarrhea. I mean, she would eat and she would be on the bathroom floor, like hanging over the toilet, green. She looked terrible. And Tim and I, my husband and I would, we were kind of hanging by a thread, as parents with the other kids. We were totally outnumbered, and we were just not paying all that much attention to what she was eating. So, we started to tune into what she was eating and started to notice that when we would take her to get like Oberweis ice cream, she would be sick. Or when she would drink milk or eat yogurt or have cheese. So we started to go, it's probably dairy that she's having an issue with. So we took the dairy out, or, as she was 10, so it's not that easy to remove dairy, but we tried our best to, limit dairy. And then when I took her to her next school visit, I told her doctor about what I was thinking, and she agreed. And she said she's probably lactose intolerant, try to remove dairy. And if she has dairy, make sure she takes like a lactate or something like that. So we went on our way and we did that, and I think we did a pretty good job. And I would say in that year, her health improved by maybe like 10-20%. We definitely saw things get a little bit better. But still, I was noticing that things still were not quite right. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, except I started to sort of, I didn't keep a food diary or anything, but I was sort of mentally taking notes. And I remember thinking, okay, it must be gluten because pasta and, bread and cereal and, granola bars would make her sick. So back to the doctor we go, and I said to the doctor, I think that she has celiac. And so they did celiac testing, and it was negative. And quite honestly, I think I was almost disappointed that it was negative because I knew something was not right. So, our doctor, who is lovely, wonderful woman, just said, keep giving her gluten, she can have gluten. And so it's interesting, I walked away, and I remember, and maybe it wasn't really, that day or the next day or even, that week, but I can remember thinking something is not right. I know it's not right. I know the doctor's telling me that it's okay, but it's not. And I think that for me was sort of like the aha moment of listen to your intuition. I could take her to some other doctors and maybe they would, find something, but I knew that I needed to really pursue this and figure out what was going on. So I went home and I started taking some online classes just for fun. I mean, not for certification, but just to kind of get and gather information, on non-celiac gluten sensitivity and a bunch of different things along those lines. And then finally at one point I came upon the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which is an online health coaching school. It's a holistic health coaching school. And I took their sample class. And it was like everything that I had been thinking since I was just a young, new nurse, all came together. Like I knew I couldn't believe just in this one class that integrative health existed, and this was all about prevention and food and lifestyle, and foods can have this huge impact on your body. And so, I mean, without skipping a beat, I signed up for their online health coaching program. I didn't run it by anybody. I didn't even ask Tim, which normally, you know, we're married, we have, if I'm gonna spend a few $1,000s, I would probably discuss that with him first. But I felt this inner voice, like I knew that I needed to do this and I couldn't explain it. And so I just went and I started the program. And I tell you, I mean, every Monday a new module would open up and I would be like sitting at my computer at like 8, like waiting for the next one to open. And when it would end, I was so unhappy that it was over because I loved it so deeply and I knew that I was in the right place. And then about 6 months into the program, there was a lecturer named Dr. Robin Berzin, who is the most amazing woman. She's a physician, internal medicine physician who became a functional medicine doctor. And she did a lecture on functional medicine, which I had really never heard of before. And I was like blown away. And I thought, this is where I need to be. I mean, I loved integrative health and health coaching, but functional medicine was what I really knew I wanted to be doing. So if you're not familiar with functional medicine, I would start to get familiar with it. It's sort of the wave of the future, but it's all about the body being interconnected and that symptoms are a sign of dis-ease in the body as opposed to disease. Like we all want this kind of, give me the diagnosis, what's the label? No, symptoms are just a sign of dis-ease in the body. It's your body communicating with you to say, hey, something's not right, I need some attention. And I'm a strong believer that our body, you know, whispers to us softly in the form of symptoms and waits for us to take action until the time that we don't, and all of a sudden our body roars at us really loudly and forces us to take action. And that's typically when you see, you know, now it's full-blown a heart attack, cancer, autoimmune disease. So functional medicine is all about root cause and looking at the body head to toe and really trying to figure out where those symptoms are coming from. And so I always tell my clients, you know, to compare conventional medicine to functional medicine is like saying, if I sat on a tack and I had pain from sitting on the tack and I went to my conventional medicine doctor, they would say, here, take an Advil for the pain. Functional medicine would say, well, let's remove the tack. So it's a really logical way to approach the body. It makes a lot of sense. It takes a lot of time oftentimes to do sort of a root cause investigation. And it takes a little bit of money because you're usually doing some testing, but more times than not, we get to the bottom of things and you know, symptoms resolve. So I finished the health coaching program at IIN, and then I've taken 2 functional medicine training programs since because I love it so much. And so, you know, I guess in talking about intuition, I love this because it's intuition, not intellect, is the open sesame of yourself. And I think, you know, when you think about, you know, we really have to start trusting ourselves. And I think a lot of us don't trust ourselves for whatever reason. You know, we are our own body's expert. We know ourselves better than anyone else. Even if you've been going to your doctor for 25 years, your doctor is not living in your body. You're living in your body. So I've had clients that will come to me and say, the doctor says it's not this, or but they know intuitively something is wrong. But the doctor sends them away with eventually what seems like, what I often see is finally an antidepressant, because it just must be in your head. And so I really encourage my clients to really, you know, own it and don't give up and keep following it if that's what you think that it might be. Your inner voice is guiding you toward a new path, then listen. So I think whether it means symptoms in your body, whether it's a passion that you have for something, following your intuition is the way to go. I mean, if you listen to what other people say, you'll never find your own path. You have to listen to that inner voice. I mean, I've seen that happen so many times before. It could be in a relationship. It doesn't matter. In every area of your life, intuition always trumps, that inner voice. Like I said, if your inner voice says something's not quite right, it isn't. And it doesn't mean it's something big. It just means it's something that you need to pay attention to. Really listen to that inner voice. You need to own that and trust yourself deeply. And I think as we're in our sort of middle and later years, it's more important than ever because people, you know, at that point you really do know yourself so deeply. You know, we're so seasoned. And so I think it's so important to not be dismissed by other people and to really follow that inner voice. And don't worry about what anyone else thinks. And I think that's a really hard thing for women. But I think, and I don't know about you guys, once I hit my 40s, there is something about you hit 40 and you're like, I don't care what anyone else thinks, I'm gonna do it anyway. So, I know this is your interesting report, this one came back. And I wanna just wrap up with, I love this quote by Steve Jobs. It's, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking back. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. That will make all the difference. And I think that is so true about intuition, that oftentimes we get really afraid that the path will not, you know, we want our whole plan laid out for us. We don't want to trust that intuition because we want to know where it's going to lead us. And I think when you actually trust your intuition, the path reveals itself as you walk it. And at the same time, I think oftentimes it's not the well-worn path. So it can be scary because you watch everyone else on this path, this very well-worn path, and your intuition is telling you to go that way, and no one's on that path, and that's okay. I think the important thing is always to follow your intuition. I think when you do, you will never be led astray. So I'm hoping that this helps you a little bit to trust yourself a little bit more deeply. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. That was so good. And you know, I told Jill when we first got together, like, you're so own it. Like, she just, right? And I thought, you're teaching women, there's the medical knowledge, but you're also teaching that sort of self-confidence. And I think you so model that, and I can't help but think how important that is. So, yes. So again, and he's got the microphone. Does anyone have any questions for Jill? Okay, Laura Jean.
Oh, I'm sorry, here's the mic. Usually I don't need one. What happened to your daughter? What was the diagnosis?
She did, well, she had food sensitivities, and that was really the only diagnosis. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, so she had food sensitivities. And so it was just interesting because, and we actually ended up doing a food sensitivity test, ultimately. But, you know, with food sensitivities, it's really just eliminate foods, bring them back in and see what happens. And so that's what we discovered. So she's off at college. She's actually in Southern California where they have farm-to-table food. So that was really fortunate that she picked that route. So she's actually doing really, really well. Yeah, thanks.
Anybody else?
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you work with a client? I'm sure everybody's different, but...
Yeah, so I do everything virtually, and I know that sounds so funny, but most of my clients are actually out of town. I have a few clients that are in town. I'm actually going to be seeing clients in October. I will have a little bit of space in Naperville, a couple days a month, but I purposely do it online because I have people sort of everywhere. So I use a platform called the Zoom platform. A lot of you have probably used it. So it's almost like you're sitting in the same room, and I use a portal where almost like a medical record that's HIPAA compliant. So everything is HIPAA compliant. So when I started health coaching, I was definitely doing more food and lifestyle stuff for sure. But as I've gone through the functional medicine training, there's a lot more testing, there's a lot more clinical to it, so I tend to sort of bring in, you know, it is a little bit more medical, a little bit more sensitive information, so I wanted everything to be HIPAA compliant. So it is all HIPAA compliant as well. So I typically will do a pretty lengthy, what I call a discovery session, about 90 minutes. I'll sit together with a client after they've answered some questions through some paperwork, and we'll go through symptoms and go through sort of their history. And we'll start to create a roadmap for what we can do to start making those, what I call tiny edits toward better health, because I think most women don't have time to make huge changes, and most of the time huge changes don't last. They're very unsustainable. So, and I think for most of us, if we've been on the planet for a while, we have habits that have been with us for a long time. So, you know, telling someone, you know, even with Claire, to say stop eating dairy, it takes a while, and that's not something and I don't like kale, by the way. Everybody thinks I like kale because I'm a health coach. I just want you to know that. And they think I'm going to make them eat kale, but that's not what I do. I mean, I will help you if you want to eat healthier, of course, but I do try to help you clean up your diet, and we look at toxins and other things. But typically, I try to work with clients for about a 3-month period of time, because it takes a little while to kind of get in the groove and sort of have that relationship to help support them, you know, weekly. So, yeah.
How do people get in touch with you if they want to?
So I have a website, which I think there's cards in it. I think we're going to send something. I have a, Dale's going to send, are you sending something to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, in a couple of days, we sent out an email that has a link to each of our speakers, so you can find out more about them. So Jill, thank you so much.
Yeah.